Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as now it's time to talk Rise of the Beasts. Yes, the first teaser trailer for the upcoming 2023 film is here, and whilst it's not exactly my usual fare to do this kind of thing, there's simply so much to talk about that I fancied trying my hand at a bit of a breakdown of everything contained within. After all, it's tremendously exciting to not only see some classic Generation 1 Transformers characters back again for this new outing, but a total big screen reinvention of many of the Beast Wars cast from the 1990s as well, something that many fans have been dreaming about for years. We're talking bots, beasts, bad guys and more, so let's get cracking. Before we begin, today's video is brought to you by TF Source, so I'll throw a link to their site in the description below. I'd also be very grateful if you could leave me a like for this video please, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also in the description is a link to my Patreon, where in exchange for your support you can get access to a ton of perks including exclusive galleries and early access to some of my other videos. Finally, there's a link to my Redbubble store where you can pick up a huge range of different designs including loads of my Transformers photos across all kinds of different merch. So, the trailer begins quietly enough with some establishing location shots, including brief glimpses of both New York, where much of this movie will take place, and what is likely to be part of the Amazon rainforest, given that we know at least some of this film was shot on location in Peru, something which is made all the more obvious later on. However, it's not long before this trailer's first big moment, which is the arrival of Optimus Primal, seen here in his imposing gorilla form as he beats his chest in front of human protagonists Noah and Elena, new characters who will be portrayed by franchise first-timers Anthony Ramos and Dominic Fishback respectively. Primal himself is of course the heroic leader of the Maximals, as first established in Beast Wars, which was traditionally all about the descendants of classic Generation 1 Transformers crash landing on prehistoric Earth and taking on realistic animal alternate forms to survive the harsh levels of raw energon they uncovered, at least initially. This take on Primal seems to be a bit of a departure from that, as the gorilla mode is a lot more mechanical in nature, and certainly a lot larger too, which raises questions about just how these Beast Mode characters will be worked into the plot with a convincing and relevant backstory. There are some hints to that with the initial teaser text in the trailer, which talks about something having awakened after millions of years, whilst our world has transformed in the meantime. This seems to be a reference to Primal and the Maximals having been dormant on Earth all this time and having only just re-emerged in the present era, which for this film is 1994. There's no clear indication yet about how they came to be there, and if indeed they travel back in time to prehistoric Earth from the far future, as is typically the case with Beast Wars canon, although there are hints towards that at least. Primal's gorilla design actually looks not a million miles away from concept artwork we've seen for the character from 2017's Transformers film The Last Night, where he was considered for inclusion during the early stages of production, although personally I think that storyline had enough going on already. Here you can see at least some organic elements to his beast form, including an obvious hide and some hair on areas such as the shoulders and chest, with some fans saying the techno-organic nature at play here more reminds them of the Beast Machine's design for the character if anything, and I can kind of see why. Primal's increased size also gives off major King Kong vibes in a way, which is no surprise as the reason the character was given a gorilla alt mode originally was to pay homage to that same classic film, which makes sense when you consider they both end up facing off against a Tyrannosaurus Rex in their respective storylines, although there's no sign of that here.
Yes.
Also present on his chest is the classic Maximal symbol, which is a real thrill to see in live action at long last. Later on we get to see Primal running into battle and transforming into his robot mode, which is surely one of the standout moments of the trailer for many. The robot mode itself has a head design which feels at least relatively faithful to his classic portrayal when it had the battle mask in place, and you can also very briefly see him wielding a pair of pop-out swords on his arms, and some sort of flail-like weapon, both of which seem to be nods to the original 1996 gorilla toy of this character. There's even a moment when we see him wielding the swords in battle and holding them attached to one another, which again was a feature from the toy and has been seen in animation at times too. Primal is voiced here by the legendary Ron Perlman, who already brought him to life in the 2018 Transformers web series Power of the Primes. Some fans will no doubt be sad not to see the character's classic voice actor Gary Chalk brought back for the role though. It's not long before Optimus Primal is confronted by Autobot leader Optimus Prime, who of course here is back again to be the continued poster boy for the franchise. Whilst Prime himself needs no introduction, he does have a bit of a new look going on. Overall, it skews fairly heavily towards the character's appearance from 2018's Bumblebee, a design which generally went over as a real favourite in the eyes of most fans, even if it was in turn quite a sizable departure from how he looked in the previous Michael Bay film series. There's still a lot of debate about whether Rise of the Beasts is a prequel of sorts to those same stories, as well as being more of an obvious sequel to Bumblebee. Certainly there's a lot of plot here which would seem to blatantly contradict events as established in the initial 5 films. Although, given how frequently that happened throughout those same installments, and that continuity has never been a major concern of this series, I'd say perhaps it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, it feels like maybe Rise of the Beasts will sing from Bumblebee's hymn book by keeping things fairly loose and open to interpretation, just enough that if you really want all these films to be in the same universe, you can sort of make that claim. Although there's going to have to be some fairly major leaps in logic along the way to get you there. In any case, the Prime design has undergone at least a few changes since we saw it last, looking slightly skinnier and a lot more robotic in places, with the proportions around the chest and waist arguably evoking the vintage 1984 toy design more than ever before. He also now has an integrated hand cannon, which we see retract and shrink down to his regular forearm. This pops up again later in the trailer and is a new feature for the Autobot in live action, although it at least loosely recalls a similar ability seen during the Transformers Prime cartoon from 2010. Also later in the trailer we see brief glimpses of Optimus wielding a pair of integrated swords, much as he did rather iconically during the Michael Bay films. Another thing to note is the character's retractable battle mask, which is certainly nothing new by now, although here it seems like the face underneath it bears arguably more resemblance to his original 2007 live action design, albeit with the more classic 1980s style helmet. We also get a quick moment of Optimus in his alternate form as he's driving over a bridge, much in the same way he was when we last saw him at the end of Bumblebee, although the truck model used for this film has also been updated here, despite it still being that of a Freightliner semi not at all dissimilar to his typical Generation 1 appearance. Optimus is again voiced by franchise mainstay Peter Cullen, who is most synonymous with this role since the very beginning in 1984. We get this fantastic shot of both Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal standing off against each other, which is surely an incredible moment for Transformers fans to see, despite it hardly being the first time these two have met over the years, given it first briefly happened during the original Beast Wars cartoon and then more recently in the Netflix series War for Cybertron Kingdom. Though they're initially at loggerheads, Optimus Primal says he's not the one to fear and that there is a darkness coming, which might be a reference to this film's known villain, the Terracon known as Scourge, or could potentially be our first hint that the rumours of an appearance by the Transformers' largest and most infamous bad guy, the Planet Eater known as Unicron, might actually be true. There's another nod in that direction later when we hear voiceover from Primal saying, "Of all the threats from both your past and future, you've never faced anything like this," which seems to confirm the time-hopping shenanigans of the Maximal crew, but also puts me in mind of a classic line from Kup in the 1986 Transformers movie when he first saw Unicron.
Doesn't this remind you of anything, Kup?
Nope. Never seen anything like this before.
There was also a plot point involving Unicron in Transformers The Last Knight, although please do not ask me to explain it here. Traditionally though, he's a planet-sized robot who spends his days eating other worlds, something which would certainly be quite epic to see in live action. There's already been intense speculation he'll show up at some point during Rise of the Beasts, or at least that this film will lead to his inclusion further down the line in a potential trilogy. Time will tell. Speaking of plot points, we get this blink and miss it clip of what appears to be the Brooklyn Bridge, with the lights flickering and some visible lightning in the background. That's potentially tied to another shot later in the trailer when we see 3 meteor-like entities landing in the Hudson, which of course recalls the method used in the Michael Bay films for how Transformers are often shown arriving on Earth. There's no confirmation if this is what's actually happening here, but it seems likely and could be the moment our main 3 Terracon aggressors first arrive. Moving on, we get this wonderful clip of Bumblebee transforming, which to my eye gave very similar vibes to the very first live-action Transformers film, and one of the classic clips from that trailer. Interestingly, it looks like Bumblebee still has his unmodified 1977 Chevy Camaro mode we first saw him adopt at the end of his 2018 solo film, and that he still had in the more modern setting in Transformers 2007, although we do know that he will undergo some all-terrain modifications during this storyline, especially as we glimpse that later on in this same trailer. Otherwise, Bumblebee looks not too dissimilar from when we saw him last, and given there's no voice actor confirmed for him here, it seems like he will still not have the ability to speak, in line with previous films. Next up is new Autobot character Mirage, here in a super sleek Porsche 964 alternate mode, a form more commonly associated with fan favourite franchise star Jazz, whereas Mirage is historically portrayed as a Formula 1 racer. This name swap situation has certainly disgruntled some die-hard fans online, especially those questioning why the Porsche couldn't have just been called Jazz to begin with, though it's possible this was simply a trademark thing given how that character's name has had to be approached over the years. In any case, it's certainly not the first instance of classic names being used in creative ways, and it won't be the last, so there's no point getting too concerned about it, at least least in my opinion. Perhaps more interesting is whether we'll see any licensed Porsche toys for this character, given that the brand has historically not wanted to be associated with the Transformers franchise, as in their words, the war machines don't represent the lifestyle and ideas they do. Here we see Noah getting inside Mirage, although he's evidently not yet aware of the car's real nature, as evidenced by his panic once the Autobot starts racing away, with him helplessly along for the ride and the police in hot pursuit. When Noah first gets in, there's this brief focus on the Autobot badge on the steering wheel, which is a sure nod towards a similar moment in the first Transformers live-action film, perhaps here establishing Mirage as the more audience-friendly, relatable robot for this storyline. We see some incredibly cool abilities from Mirage, including this clip of the Autobot driving backwards to avoid the police, before literally transforming around Noah, who can do nothing but look on in awe, and then finally ending up in a forward-facing position again. Mirage then creates 4 identical holograms of himself to evade detection, something which not only looks really interesting, but directly calls back the character's classic abilities in the 1980s cartoon. He then makes one of the holograms disappear, causing this bewildered police officer to crash before taking off at pace with Noah still inside. They'll clearly learn to work together, as come the climax of the trailer we get this outstanding sequence of Mirage transforming with Noah casually stepping out halfway through the process, which also gives us a very brief look at the Autobot's robot mode. It doesn't really look like G1 Mirage in any respect, nor Jazz for that matter, so odds are this is a new interpretation entirely. Mirage is voiced by actor and comedian Pete Davidson. Next we get this fantastic shot of the now modified vehicle mode Bumblebee riding alongside the classic Beast Wars character known as Cheetor, here seen with a very oversized and partially robotic cheetah form. Like Optimus Primal, it's a departure from his typical portrayal, where he's significantly smaller and seen as entirely organic, at least in his original form. Although once again, something about this portrayal is giving at least a partial vibe of his appearance in Beast Machine somehow, especially with the more techno-organic appearance. We do get a snippet of Cheetor running into the same climactic battle alongside Optimus Primal, and like the Maximal leader, he transforms to his robot mode as he goes. There's no clear look at his humanoid eyes here though, although it can be glimpsed in the background at one point. It's very blurry and hard to discern, but again, something about this is giving off serious Beast Machine vibes to my eye. Interestingly, we don't as yet know who will be portraying Cheetor in the film, although it was classically portrayed by voice acting talent Ian James Corlett. Next up we see our third Maximal character, this being the Falcon known as Air Razor. Like Optimus Primal and Cheetor, she faithfully retains her typical beast mode, although again she's noticeably oversized and a lot more technological than how she was portrayed in the 1990s animation. She appears to be breathing fire, which is something of a new ability for the character, and whilst it's not clear what's happening here exactly, you can see Optimus Prime running into the scene from the left, so that's intriguing. We don't see any hint of her robot mode in the trailer, but there have already been leaked images of 2 separate toys doing the rounds, including a deluxe and a studio series version. These give us a fairly good idea of what Air Razor is potentially going to look like, and assuming the film follows suit, it's actually not a million miles away from her 90s portrayal in a lot of ways. Air Razor is going to be voiced in this film by the legend that is Michelle Yeoh. Next we get this action-packed shot involving Mirage avoiding a falling boulder, although it's what's in the background that's perhaps more interesting. Firstly, we see Optimus Prime rolling down a hill, clearly mid-battle with a very hard to discern assailant, although it appears to be the Terracon Scourge. More on him in a moment. However, you'll also note an exceptionally brief snippet of another Terracon, this being the character Nightbird. Now, the original Nightbird was a human-created, non-transformable robot ninja who first appeared in the classic 1980s Transformers cartoon episode Enter the Nightbird, although she has since cropped up in the franchise again, typically these days shown as transforming into a black and grey version of G1 RC's car mode. Here we know that she will be part of the Terracon crew and will transform into a Nissan Skyline GTR, so perhaps quite a different take overall. There's no clear robot mode shot in sight here, but there are 2 very blurry snippets from the end battle which at least appear to be the same character, and I'm betting both of these are Nightbird, meaning she can also fly in this interpretation, which is a new ability for her. Nightbird will be voiced by film, TV and theatre actress Micaela Hai Rodriguez. Next we come to this memorable scene involving several other new characters embroiled in a fast-paced high-stakes battle. We're introduced to another member of the evil Terracon crew, this being Battletrap, who here transforms into a GMC Topkick C7000 tow truck. The name Battletrap is historically associated with the Decepticon Duocon, who was able to split apart into separate helicopter and truck alternate forms, but there's no sign of that ability here, so expect a more straight uptake. We later see Battletrap leading the charge in his robot form, where he's taking heavy fire, and again in a one-on-one with Optimus Primal whilst he's wielding those swords we talked about. Like Air Razor, there are some images of a Studio Series Battletrap toy that have already been leaked, and they give us a great insight into what we can expect from this big screen baddie here. This character is voiced by franchise heavyweight David Sobolov, who has long been associated with Transformers since voicing Depth Charge during Beast Wars, and later doing work for cartoons such as Transformers Prime and appearing as Blitzwing in the 2018 Bumblebee movie. Battletrap is firing a missile at 2 Autobot characters here, that being RC RC and Wheeljack, although at least one of these looks very different to how we've ever seen them before. RC is one of the most discernible robots in this entire trailer, and it's fair to say she looks fantastic, being at once fairly faithful to her original 1980s portrayal, whilst also blending in plenty of new elements too, including a lot more red than we're used to seeing on her. In this film, she will transform into a Ducati 916 motorcycle, which is an alternate mode in line with her previous live-action portrayal in Revenge of the Fallen, if indeed that's really worth considering at all. And her fan-favourite turn in the Transformers Prime cartoon, although there she was blue instead. We had also previously seen RC popping up at the beginning of Bumblebee during the Cybertron sequence, with her portrayal here not feeling entirely out of line with that. For Rise of the Beasts, RC will be voiced by actress and YouTuber Liza Koshy. We later see RC twice again, including this scene towards the end of the trailer where Elena is questioning if what she's seeing is really happening, and this shot of the main Autobot cast from the rear as they walk through what appears to be Machu Picchu. Of course, we also get a clear look at Mirage here too, and indeed Wheeljack, although it really doesn't give us much to go on. As we've seen, Wheeljack transforms into a VW camper van, a world away from the same character's classic 1980s Lancia Stratos alternate mode, which implies that, like Mirage, the two portrayals have little or nothing to do with one another. Certainly that shot of the rear of his robot mode feels very different to the mostly quite faithful takes seen during the Bumblebee Cybertron sequence, which even featured his iconic blue light-up ears. I'm not holding out for such a thing here, mind. Wheeljack is voiced for this film by actor and former footballer Cristo Fernandez. Now we come to our next big character reveal, and it's the Terracon leader himself, Scourge. We first see him standing over Optimus Prime as Bumblebee attempts to sneak up on him from the rear, only for Scourge to surprise the Autobot and skewer him directly through the chest, before holding him aloft in a manner that had me remembering his similar predicament with Blitzwing in the 2018 film. We also get a very decent look at Scourge's robot mode here, which seems to be very different from anything we've ever seen associated with this name in the past, before he appears to let out some sort of energy blast of some kind, which Bumblebee doesn't appear to be appreciating. Scourge is confirmed as one of the main antagonists of this film, and turns into a Peterbilt 359 semi-truck. The alternate mode and name at least put in mind the fan-favourite Decepticon character from the 2001 Robots in Disguise series, who was an evil clone of Optimus Prime and essentially perfected the template for such an idea moving forward. This new take is certainly very different to that in terms of the robot mode, and is said to be a trophy hunter who loves to collect the faction symbols of his defeated opponents. Scourge is going to be voiced here by famed actor Peter Dinklage. Our final new character glimpse is also our last beastly bot, the powerhouse Maximal known as Rhinox. We don't see much of him beyond this rather impressive roar, although it seems like an obvious callback to the character's portrayal in the classic 1990s Beast Wars series.
Rhinox, maximize!
As with the other Maximals, Rhinox is a lot more techno-organic than seen in that show, and presumably will be a lot larger too, as suggested by a very blurry, blink-and-you-miss-it glimpse of his robot mode later in the trailer. Like Cheetor, it's hard to make out, but it at least looks relatively consistent with how we typically think of the character from the cartoon, so that could be good. Rhinox will also be portrayed by David Sobolov, alongside Battletrap. We then come to this detailed shot of Optimus Prime transforming, which for me gave a very similar vibe to the now iconic scene from the 2007 movie when we first meet the character, although I have heard a few grumbles about the CGI being employed here, which it has to be said does look slightly unfinished in parts. Still, with more than 7 months to go before the film is released, there's still plenty of time to work on that, and for my part, I really enjoyed a lot of what we saw in that regard. All of which leads into this mega explosive, high-octane battle scene at the end of the trailer, which looks to be every bit as thrilling as fans are surely hoping for as the Autobots and Maximals fight side by side against the Terracons. It's hard to make out exactly what's going on in the background here at times, but it certainly appears as though there are numerous other robots involved, although there's every possibility that they're just nameless Terracon cannon fodder of some kind. That all cuts to the big title card reveal and that spinning faction symbol, involving the Maximal logo, a new Terracon logo, and the well-known Autobot symbol too, before we hopefully get further glimpses of the film early into 2023, ahead of its release in June. For my money, I think it's shaping up to be an intriguing project so far. It looks to be really rather enjoyable, even if I would advise die-hard fans not to worry too much about it being uber faithful to any particular kind of source material. Ultimately, as with any Transformers fiction, these things are best enjoyed on their own merit, instead of going in with any preconceived ideas, especially considering it's quite literally a franchise that's built around the theme of change. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you'd like to see me try my hand at more stuff like this, please do let me know in the comments. Otherwise, you'll find a link to TF Source's site in the video description below, so be sure to check them out for all your Transformers and third-party needs. There are also links to both my Patreon and Redbubble, so be sure to check them out if you want to support me in exchange for some awesome perks and merch. Finally, I'd love it if you could drop me a like for today's video, please. And don't forget to let me know your thoughts on Rise of the Beast so far. Do you like what you see, or not so sure? Otherwise, that's it from me, so thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day. TTFN.